please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
They're also seeking approval for resolution plan to be brought down from requiring 100% voting by lenders to only 75% agreement.
Well, the first stake is absolutely flat, 10,330. And that's Lemon Tree actually listing at a good 12% premium.
I saw a little bit of a dip, not much. We're up 43 points, 10,375. It's been up between 35 and 50, 60 points from the mornings.
Market has been rewarding you for the last 3-4 days for buying the dips. It's not as if we are ending way off the high point.
Global tailwinds ensure steady gains on the first week of the new trading week, first day rather. Nifty and Sensex end 0.5% in the green.
And the RBI may make modifications to the NPA resolution circular soon. Banks in their presentations have sought number of lender approvals to be cut to 75% from around 100%. That's an exclusive.
Oil marketing companies star in today's trade, boosted by lower crude prices. HPCL, BPCL, IOC all close over 3%.
And tech stocks underperform on quiet earnings expectations. The IT index slips closer on 0.5%. The NBFCs also fall in trade today as bond yields bounce back up.
Stocks and news. Titan hits a 52-week high post bullish management commentary. Jubilant Food also continues its uptick on hopes of better same-store sales growth in the coming quarter. Tata Motors slips post weak global JLR sales. Well, hello and welcome. Those were the top 5 headlines from the day's trading action. You're watching Markets Today Talk Back. This is the show where we tell you about the 8 hours of market action in 5 headlines. I'm Ekta Batra, and with me this evening is Nigel D'Souza. Hi, Nigel.
Well, thanks so much for that, Ekta. Well, over the next 30 minutes odd, we'll discuss the top 5 market headlines, and our experts will answer all your stock queries. Joining us now to answer all your stock queries are Deepan Mehta, member of BSE as well as NSE, and technical expert Ashwini Gujral. Thank you for joining us on the show, gentlemen. But before we come to you, let's take a look at how markets fared in today's trading session, Ekta.
Well, Nigel, you know, it turned out to be a great start to the week. We both were on Power Breakfast this morning, and we saw that the SGX was in negative terrain, but that managed to recover. We saw a steady start because of what happened in the Asian markets as well. So overall, it seems as though the trade war fears, which the markets have been plagued by globally, seem to be receding a little bit now. So overall, we had the Nifty and the Sensex, which were up around 0.5% in today's trade. What also stood out was that the advance decline ratio was quite steady. So if you just look at the BSE, we had around 1,700 stocks advancing to around 1,158 stocks declining by the close of trade. The Bank Nifty outperformed. So that was one of the key indices which managed to recover over 250 points from the day's low. It was a strong comeback which came in from the Bank Nifty, and we had something like an ICICI Bank which gained around 2% from the day's low. In fact, all of the Bank Nifty constituents except for something like a Kotak Mahindra Bank were in the green in today's trade. IT stocks were a bit sluggish, so Infosys and TCS were down and out. Remember, Infosys comes out with numbers on Friday, and we had consumption stocks which really also were stars today, the likes of Titan. Tell us more, Nigel. Well,
you know, the Nifty seems to be stuck in that range of around the 100 DMA to around the 200 DMA odd. So we should get both those levels up for you on the screen. On the upside, around 10,436. Downside, close to around 10,200 odd. Today's rally, really, the Nifty Bank played a very, very good role. While the IT and pharma stocks, well, they're normally the defenses. The defenses, they got bold today. Both IT and pharma index and otherwise a strong market, they didn't do well. Why did the banks do well? Well, you had IndusInd Bank, your Axis Bank as well, that did very, very well in today's trading session. And the OMCs, all 3 of them did end with gains of roughly around 2 to around 3% in today's trading session. The heavy lifting, though, was done by ITC. That is trading at rather cheap valuations in comparison to what it normally trades at around 26, 27 times or thereabouts. But Titan, even at trading at around 50 times or its trailing earnings, well, that stock did well. It was up closer around 2% odd. There was some weakness in select stocks though. Lupin did come in for some profit booking, Tata Motors as well. Both those two stocks, remember, they rallied close to around 10% in the last week. So both of them did see some selling. But otherwise, in the final hour of trade, you had stocks like Venky's, Waterbase, all of them just spiked up in trade. You had Aban Offshore as well that did well. And a couple of other names, PVR did see some selling last week. That bounced up. And Raymond as well, that stock as well did do pretty well in today's trading session.
Okay, well, let's find out what our guests make of the markets. In fact, we have Dipan joining in as well as Ashwini. Well, Dipan, I'll come to you first. What are your thoughts in terms of where we are going from here on? Because we seem to be stuck in this range of between the 100 DMA as well as the 200 DMA.
I think the critical factor is the earnings season. And we do see a lot of stock volatility around that time. And I think after many weeks of bad news, you may have some good news coming through. And we all know the first of the earnings season is always the good results keep on coming. So after such a correction that we have seen, I think maybe a bottom has got formed. And the earnings season could be a trigger for the market to rally even higher from these levels.
All right. For the last few years, Dipan, we have not seen that double-digit Nifty EPS growth. But this year, all hopes are there. At least at the start of the year, we are saying, yes, we are going to see that 20 to around 24% growth in terms of earnings growth. But I think we can go to our second headline of the day. The RBI, they may make modifications to the NPA resolution circular soon. Banks in their presentations have sought number of lender approvals to be cut to around 75% from around 100%. This comes a day before the Parliamentary Standing Committee is scheduled to take up the tweaks required in the 12th February circular. The Nifty Bank Index was up close to around 1% on the back of this news. We in fact spoke to Mr. Rajiv Kumar, the DFS Secretary, on the tweaks to the NPA and the overall banking sector. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
IBA has represented to the RBI. There are representations which have come from other sources as well. The regulator is seized with the matter. There are 2-3 specific issues out there. One is about the one-day default. Another is about the veto. So I'm sure the decision will be taken and the references have been sent to the regulator for this.
Okay, well, let's get in a couple of queries now. First up, we have Twitter user Ishank Gupta who wants to buy Yes Bank for 2 to 3 years. Should he go ahead with it, or are there any other stocks that he can look at? Well, Ashwini, what would you recommend on Yes Bank? Is it Yes Bank or some other stock that you'd recommend from, say, a 2 to 3 year perspective?
See, from a 3-year perspective, I think Yes Bank is better, because it has bad news, etc. Corporate banks have had downside, and maybe you could say maybe 380 and then even 450, 460. But if it's short term, then don't try to buy banks which are at 52-week lows.
Okay, all right. Ashwini, in fact, I wanted to ask you about the Nifty Bank. Today it was the star from the recent lows. It's rallied a goodish bit. Technically, how's the Nifty Bank looking?
See, if you draw a trend line from the top of the market all the way through various intermediate tops which were formed, that trend line has been broken. Plus, the 200-day moving average has been regained. So a lot of things point to a bottom being in place. Now, unless the world totally goes for a toss and trade war, etc., given those caveats, I think on declines towards 24,800 now, I think the Bank Nifty should be bought. Similarly, the Nifty, if we decline, say, towards 10,250 thereabouts for some reason, I think the Nifty can now be bought very safely, and the next target is probably 10,550, 600.
Okay. All right, we have another query now. Manthan M has 75 shares of ICICI Bank, which is bought at 253. He's been holding it for the past six months, and he's a long-term investor, wants to know if he should hold or sell that particular stock. Dipan, what would you recommend? Is this an opportunity? Do you expect ICICI Bank to outperform and come out stronger from the current issues?
There could be a trading bounce if there is some positive news flow on the controversy surrounding the bank. But on a medium to long-term basis, the preference has to be out of ICICI Bank into the retail lenders. And the earlier listener had queried about Yes Bank. I agree with Ashwini. I think it's a great long-term buy, slightly more risky than say IndusInd Bank or HDFC Bank. So my advice would be that get out of ICICI Bank into some of the high-performing, the banks which have had a good track record the last 2-3 years or so, which are retail-focused, which have relatively cleaner balance sheets, lower NPA levels. I think the focus should be over there. So I would say sell ICICI Bank, but get into some other private sector bank.
Okay, all right, let's get to our third headline for today then. It was a good day for the oil marketing companies. The stocks rose in trade, which was boosted by lower crude prices. The move really was led by HPCL, BPCL and IOC, which were all up around 3% in trade.
All right, and then our next Twitter user, in fact, Pankaj, has around 1,000 shares of IGL at a price of around 290 rupees. Wants to know if he should hold, sell, or he should add on at these levels. Ashwini, coming across to you, your take on IGL?
See, IGL is one of the outperformers in the market. It's just had a correction to its 200-day moving average at 285, so good place to get in. And I would think at some point you should see IGL touch 345, which is recent highs, and maybe even cross it. So a long-term target could be closer to 400.
All right, well, we have one more query. Hemant has 250 shares of HPCL at 440. He's been holding that stock for 7 months and he's a long-term investor as well. Should he hold or sell that stock? Ashwini, over to you first and then we'll quiz Dipan and his view as well.
Well, you know, the macro trigger that was there in oil marketing is now over. So at best, these are, you know, ranging counters, and the lower end of this range is about 300, 330. The upper end now could be closer to, you know, 440, 450. So he's bought it at a bad price, and I don't see oil going lower. So chances are HPCL may not be able to cross its 200-day moving average at 400, 410. I think he's much better getting into an IGL or even a Reliance. The oil marketing game is probably over.
All right, oil marketing game is over. Deepan, what about you? You know, I'm only tracking the retail petrol prices when I go to fill up my tank, but is the game over on OMC's election year? So I don't know what's going to happen there.
These are not great investment stories, the oil marketing companies. There are too many variables, there's government interference, and as such, you know, the volumes are not growing as much to kind of, you know, support an investment thesis in these companies. So I would say it's best to avoid the entire oil marketing segment. The better stories are in the financials, retail lending, consumption oriented. So when you have stronger companies, better visibility, lower risk factors, I think better to go into those counters than an HPCL.
We got through the first 3 headlines of the day, and let's get straight to the next one. That's the 4th headline now. Among the weak stocks were IT sector as well as the NBFCs. The tech stocks, well, they were muted in trade today as the street is expecting a quiet earnings season this time around. NBFCs, on the other hand, well, they were weak in trade, some profit booking on the back of bond yields spiking up. Their fall was led by the likes of Magma FinCorp, Mahindra & Mahindra Financial and India Bulls Housing Finance.
Okay, well, we have Twitter user Prabir who has 50 shares of HCL Tech at 960. He wants to know what is your view by the end of the next 3 months. So Ashwini, that's for you then, short-term question. What would you recommend?
See, large cap IT is not outperforming. If I were him, I would get into something like Sonata Software, Tata Elxsi, NIT Tech. Large cap tech is more or less range bound. So get into mid cap tech and that should outperform.
Okay, all right, get into mid cap tech, and in fact, that should outperform. Deepan, what about you? What's your view on the space on the whole? I remember you telling me IT stocks, well, you'll give it a pass a couple of months ago. Your take on some of these names?
Yeah, I think we still maintain that view. And typically as investors, you want to get into companies where you can see earnings visibility for 2-3 years or so.
Yeah.
And that particular visibility is not there in IT companies. Sure, you could have one good year, maybe 2-3 good quarters, base effects, certain new services or new orders getting executed or acquisitions coming into play. But these are no longer long-term secular growth stories, and as such, investors should avoid them. And no doubt, I think they were cheaper in terms of price earning multiple a few months ago, but that also has got reversed. So I would say at every rise, at every trading bounce, IT shares should certainly be sold off. Get into the more high growth businesses which are domestically focused. And whatever is happening in the world as of now, all these trade wars and protectionism, that's not positive for IT companies.
But what would be the stocks you would recommend if not IT?
I think the banks we discussed, that's our top pick, the likes of IndusInd, Yes Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank, the retail lenders, NBFCs like say Bajaj Finance or a Capital First. And then the whole entire consumption story, right from automobiles, appliances, entertainment, retail, aviation. There is just so much of choice available for investors, where we have so many stories which are nice, showing structural growth momentum. They're able to grow their earnings by 15 to 20% or so. And those are the stocks and sectors that investors need to be overweight in.
Okay, all right, Dipan. Well, let's quickly get to our next query. We have a Twitter user, Vinati Rawat, who has a query on AB Capital. He's asking whether this is the right time to add AB Capital with a view of around 3 to around 5 years. Dipan, coming back to you. AB Capital, any view there?
Yeah, well, I think it's a company which has got a kind of a limited track record, and there's better choice in the NBFC space. So I would, look at some of the other NBFCs, the ones you discussed, like say a Bajaj Finance or a Capital First.
Even at these levels?
Even at these levels also, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And you could look at gold loan companies, the microfinance companies. So there's far too much choice in the private sector NBFC space. Maybe not the housing finance companies for various reasons. But I would say that there's far more better choice than AB Capital, and maybe give it some more time for us to understand the model of AB Capital and how it's actually performing before we have a sort of a more overweight view on the company per se.
Okay, all right. Now let's move to our final headline of the day then. The stocks in news. First up, Titan hit a 52-week high post bullish management commentary which signaled towards mid-teen growth in the jewelry segment in the fourth quarter. Even Jubilant Food continued its uptake on hopes of better same-store sales growth in the coming quarter. Tata Motors, on the other hand, was weak. Their global JLR sales slipped around 8% as compared to last year. In fact, we have another query now. We have Sada Shiv, who's been holding 151 shares of Titan at 829 for a month. Long-term investor, should he hold or sell? Well, Ashwini, let's come to you first on it. Do you think that technically Titan's looking strong for a longer-term view?
His price is 850.
Yeah, 829.
He needs to understand that he's not an early investor, A. B, yes, it looks good. Why? Because it's made a new high while the market is still 8-9% away from it. But he needs to, behave and think like a trader, because the price is not exactly panic levels or very low levels. So keep a break-even style stop, and maybe above 940. We should be looking at 1120 to 1140, those sort of levels, but just don't lose money after making this sort of gain.
All right, so be careful after you've gotten it around 930 odd. It's not the very low point, but you're making some money, so be careful in terms of this investment. Deepan, I want to ask you, Titan, a lot of these jewelry companies, they're going belly up. So that could really mean a bigger market share for Titan. The stock's not cheap in terms of forward earnings, as well as trading at around 50-55 times odd. Couple of notes this morning. What would your advice be to this investor who's got in at around 830? We're talking about a Nifty stock now, mind you.
That's right. And he is also a long-term investor, so I think he's safe in this company.
Okay.
And always when you're sitting on some profit, the decision to hold is far more easier than when you're looking at notional losses.
Right.
So I say remain investor. I think have a 2-3 year kind of a view. Titan also may have a soft quarter or two going forward, maybe not this one, but you need to keep a conviction in the story. My sense is that 3 years from now, this company will be far bigger than what it is at present. And clearly what the point you referred to, with gaining at the expense of the unorganized sector, the management has referred to that trend several times in the past, and I think that is one of the key reasons positive going for Titan. And it's a kind of a unique story by itself. Although there are many jewelry companies, there's only one Titan. And because of its position, because of its brand, because of the various other factors which are going in its favor. So I would say that Titan is a kind of a core holding, or should be a core holding for many investors. Maybe not at this price point, but certainly at corrections, one should not miss the opportunity.
Okay, so that's on Titan, but we have one more query. T.S. Karthik wants to know the outlook for Jubilant Food. He wants to buy the stock for 1 to 3 months and wants the target that he should expect. Ashwini?
I think the first question is, where should we buy it? Because if you buy things randomly, the results may not be very good. The 20-day moving average is about 2250. So if any sort of correction, decline, it gets closer to these zones, that's where you need to buy. Keep a stop around 2100, and possibly, medium-term style target could be closer to 3000.
Okay, all right. I think we can squeeze in another query then. We have Piyush who wants to invest 50,000 rupees in Tata Motors and Lupin for a period of around 1 to 2 years. Wants advice on when to enter the market. Deepan, coming across to you, both these two stocks, I was looking at it at the start of last week. They were at 52-week lows. And out of nowhere, they gave you a 10% return. Your take and your advice to this caller?
No, we are negative on both these stocks. Within the same sector, there are better stocks to buy. Maybe not in pharma, but certainly in automobiles, you have to look at the likes of Eicher and Maruti. And pharma, I think, still remain quite negative. We are seeing the commoditization phase not ending over there. And there are structural changes happening in the pharma industry, which is why I think investors should remain largely underweight. But if you still want to buy pharma, maybe something like an Ajanta Pharma or a Kaplan Point still looks quite interesting. But broadly, I would say have a minimal weightage for pharma. There are better stories in the domestic oriented businesses other than pharma where one could focus on.
All right. All right, Dipan as well as Ashwini, thanks very much for joining in this afternoon, evening rather, and taking us through all of these queries. And that's all the time that we have on the show. Thanks very much for watching.